Welcome to Cybersecurity Sense, a weekly podcast providing updates and insight into the latest in cybersecurity. Brought to you by LBMC Information Security. Now, here's your host.
Hi, I'm Bill Dean, shareholder here at LBMC Information Security. Thank you for joining us again, and we hope that you enjoyed this content. Again, due to the level of expertise, we're going to have a special guest on the podcast that will be discussing the topic of social engineering via phishing, spear phishing. We talk about a lot of things, and every now and then we just want to have someone that's really what I consider to be an expert on the actual topic. Before we get into the meat of the topic, I want to introduce you again to Derek Rush. Many of you probably recall Derek from the multi-factor authentication episode. Derek is definitely one of our awesome pen testers here. Derek is one of those expert in all folks that when it comes to pen testing. So I just want to kind of leverage his expertise again. So Derek, for those that may not have been aware of your expertise on the previous episode, do you mind to just go ahead and give an intro there?
Sure, Bill. My name's Derek Rush. I've been in the security game for maybe 12 or 13 years, which has been split between the operational side of things and the consulting side of things as it relates to pen testing and doing some various audit work. So right now I currently focus on just pen tests and help the LBMC pen test team gain access to organizations and help try to point this stuff out to clients in a way that allows them to fix it.
Great. So thank you. So I've definitely realized it's so cliche to say that the user is, the number one vulnerability. I kind of get that. Part of me wants to think that we need to help these users with some controls, but at the same time, phishing always seems to come up. So head to head, just give me your stats on compromising an organization, meaning firewalls or systems based on compromising the actual users. Where do you feel that our success is, doing hundreds of pen tests a year? Where do you think our success lies overall?
Yeah, to start from the top down, I think it would put phishing credentials from users at the top. And then right below that, I would put guessing user credentials right underneath that. And then below that one, I would put compromising general network or web application infrastructure to gain some level of unauthorized access. And we may do all three of those on any one assessment. We may just do one of those on an assessment. But in general, how we gain access to the internal network is going to be either through phishing a user, guessing a weak password, or finding a technical vulnerability within web applications or firewalls or things of that nature.
Well, given your skill set, so you obviously start with the systems, whether it's web apps or, layer 3 type of things. When you get kind of frustrated, where do you kind of stop and say, you know what, I've got something else I think I may be successful with? Would that be phishing users? I mean, where do you think that you get the most success once you kind of analyze the integrity of the security posture of the organization?
Yeah, it really differs between organizations. Let's say there's an organization that this is a fairly common security posture for smaller startups where they use a bunch of software as a service applications, and maybe in the scope of the pen test on-prem, they only have, let's say, one or two IP addresses. And on those one or two IP addresses, maybe they just have a VPN portal off one of them and a corporate blog on another. That's actually hosted by a third party and has no sort of internal network connectivity. So really, they just have that one in-scope IP address for their VPN. And let's say we try to guess some user credentials and we don't get anywhere. So at that point, given the limited attack surface, we would generally be looking towards doing a spear phish that's against a specific user. And that's just something that we include within our statements of work for any type of external pen test that we do. Knowing that organizations typically get compromised by a spear phish, that's something we feel that should be included within an external pen test to really give clients that real world value that threat actors are taking advantage of out in the field.
Definitely. And that's what we really try to do, is to actually emulate what the attackers are doing. It's not just a pen test for the network or the web app. I mean, we want to have a comprehensive type of test. So definitely appreciate you bringing that up. So, when it comes to the users and how they're susceptible to a lot of the phishing campaigns, there's a lot of different online phishing platforms. And to be honest, we suggest a few of them by name. I mean, they do a really great job, but can you kind of explain what these platforms provide compared to the pen test side of things as to how we approach what we do? We don't just do metrics, and just kind of explain that.
Yeah, so a lot of let's again throw these services into software as a service in the cases of these sort of phishing software solutions that are intended to train users and make them better able to spot phishing campaigns. And what a lot of those solutions do are really just around what's called metric-based phishing. And that's where you're really phishing for metrics. You want to know which users are more susceptible to click on something, and then that allows more targeted campaigns or targeted educational and security awareness training for the users that actually do click. So that's a great way to try to figure out how susceptible your organization is, not only to clicking, but also to which users actually report those attempts. Knowing that if you report, or let's say, one targeted user out of 100 happens to report a phishing campaign because they got into work a little bit earlier that morning. And then the other 99 users may not be as savvy as that one power user. But what that allows the help desk to do at that point, if there is the infrastructure in place for a corporation's employees to alert the help desk about phishing campaigns, then the help desk can start going through the mail gateway and recalling the email messages that went out to the other 99 users that may not have seen it yet or didn't report it. And they can also maybe check the firewall to see if there were any connections made out to those particular websites that are listed and included within those phishing campaigns, and then just block that at the firewall so that maybe they miss a user's inbox or the user's email didn't sync up with the corporate email infrastructure to recall it yet, and it's still sitting in that user's inbox, but they do happen to be on VPN. So, going through that corporate security stack, the phishing website would eventually be blocked. So a lot of that is great when it comes to metric-based phishing. But what those platforms do not provide is really a holistic look at an organization's security program and how it can actually deal with a phishing campaign. And so, as opposed to the metric-based phishing, where it really just stops at a user clicking, a more sophisticated threat actor, or even just what we do in our spear phishing as it relates to the external pen tests, what we would typically do, we would harvest credentials. So let's say a user clicks a link, we would then ask for some credentials before sending them to another part of the site to maybe take some training, for instance. So they supply us their credentials. And that allows us to do much more than what just the metric-based approaches facilitate. So we can then take those credentials and log in to an organization's external facing assets that are on the internet and figure out whether or not they have multi-factor authentication. Maybe that's the VPN portal, maybe that's Office 365, whatever the organization may have facing their internet, we can then just take those credentials and try to log into them once we harvest them. And then another scenario may be where we include a malicious payload, maybe in the context of a PowerPoint, where we include a malicious macro and it's some more training. We send it to a user. Perhaps we deliver it over something like ShareFile, knowing that a lot of the mail gateways today will pick up on malicious contents within an email. So we choose a way to deliver the malicious payload out of band. So the user clicks the malicious payload, they download it. Let's say, it's just that Microsoft PowerPoint with a malicious macro in it. And then at that point, they happen to run it. This is something, yet again, that the metric-based approaches don't really touch on, where let's say a user does get successfully phished. What happens after that? Does the organization have multi-factor authentication in place? And it doesn't necessarily matter that the user got phished. Let's say that the phish does occur, the credentials are handed over, and then a part of the phishing campaign also has the user download that malicious payload and run it. Well, what we can test in this scenario that metric-based approach won't attest is the endpoint detection and response, or the antivirus software on the actual host, which is yet another facet of a security program at an organization that is not going to be tested with just those metric-based approaches. So there's at least two areas there. And a third one, of course, is what does an attacker actually do once they gain that foothold? Let's say they make it past the email spam gateway, they make it past the antivirus and the endpoint detection and response on the corporate workstation. What happens next? Are they able to move laterally? Is there maybe some clear text credentials on network shares? Whatever it may be, a lot of those metric-based approaches really just stop at did the user click or not, and then provides metrics around that, which has a lot of value in and of itself as it relates to which users need to be trained, but there's much more value to be had with some of the more targeted phishing campaign approaches as it relates to, what happens after a user clicks.
Definitely. And so thank you so much for that. So I do want to clarify a couple of things. Many of the metric phishing assessment types of platforms, they provide legitimate training. We do not. So our training ruse is not the same thing. We're not providing legitimate training. We're actually looking to get some credentials. But you bring up a couple of interesting aspects as to, all right, how many people clicked compared to what happens when someone actually clicks. Another differentiator, in my opinion, is so when you're doing metric type of phishing, it's a really wide net. So, Derek, as you lead many of our teams when we do our penetration tests, What does that sample size look like for true spear phishing compared to the metric type of phishing?
Yeah, for the metric type of phishing, it's mainly going to be, let's call it white box phishing, where whatever third party, or maybe you're doing some internal phishing campaigns on your own, which we've seen some clients do. And I get pretty excited when my own clients are doing some internal phishing campaigns. But mainly the white box phishing assessments, or the ones being done internal, are going to have a sample set of everyone within the organization. And it's usually a good idea to target the users that have the level of access to more sensitive information. Maybe they have access to some protected health information where if a breach were to occur under that user, then that would naturally present a higher risk to the organization, knowing that the type of data that was compromised through that compromised user was more valuable than, say, something that is just out on a corporate blog. And then for the second type of phishing assessments that we're discussing here, mainly the spear phishing that are much more targeted, what we're going to do is just go out to a bunch of resources on the internet to try to figure out who works at an organization, how long they've worked at an organization is one of my favorite data points. Knowing that if there's an individual that hasn't worked at an organization very long, they may not know the lay of the land, as well as it relates to, who's reaching out to who within an organization and what the training partners are and all of that. So they're more likely to click than a user that's, say, been at an organization for 15 years. So, there's mainly two different sample sizes there. On the metric-based phishing, we have really everyone gets phished. And really the users that have more sensitive access to data, or more access to sensitive data, should have more phishing campaigns done against them, just because if they do get compromised, it's a greater organizational risk. And then on the second side of things, usually just a much smaller targeted population within an organization. Like we mentioned, users that haven't worked at an organization very long are great targets.
That's awesome. So just as a couple of examples, maybe one or two success stories that you've had. And then, what are some of the common spear phishing engagements that we, endure that we find to be the most success? I mean, which one of these scenarios seems to be best for us to help our clients get better?
Really, the topical fishes are what seems to give us the most mileage when it comes to actually gaining unauthorized access. And a topical fish can be anything that's, well, a hot topic within society. Perhaps it could be around security awareness and education training, knowing that a lot of our clients are trying to put their users through the security awareness training. There's a couple of the phishing approaches that we have that purport to be a security awareness training company that has been contracted by your internal IT. And we're reaching out to a handful of employees because they've recently clicked on a phishing email and they need to take some additional training. So they'll click the link for our website, they'll punch in their username and our password, and then they'll be redirected to some training actually around how they shouldn't be clicking things. But then at that point, we have their username and password. One other example of a good topical fish would be right around the holiday time, where we reach out and say, we recognize that the employees for company XYZ have been working fairly hard, and we'd like to offer you an additional day of PTO. Please click this link to sign up. Getting a free iPad or free coupons, or, anything that gives somebody some sort of incentive to click that link, chances are they will. And especially if you do your research in a spearfish and maybe they have a big social media presence on whoever you're targeting, you can get a lot of mileage out of what specifically you could target that person with, given what recent posts they've made on social media.
I mean, that sounds great. So, with all of this that we've discussed, do you feel that metric assessments, which we don't do you feel that they still provide value? And outside of that, how do additional types of spearfishing provide more value, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for the former case, we touched on that a little bit earlier, just around the idea of, which users need some additional security awareness training with that metric-based approach, which is great. However, you don't necessarily know what's going to happen if a user does get successfully phished. Whereas in the latter category, you'll know what happens if a user does get successfully phished, but you may not necessarily know all of the users that are susceptible to phishing. So it's really the pairing of these two different phishing approaches that is going to have the most organizational value.
That sounds great. That's exactly in line with what I feel is the best way to approach it. So I appreciate you, kind of confirming that. So, in closing for the listeners, what would you suggest organizations do to prevent kind of the attacks that you're talking about from the spearfishing perspective that we do, in which we're very focused on new employees or high value targets or those types of things? What would you recommend, Eric?
That's a tough one, Bill, when it comes to just the, getting the user up to speed and constantly educating them and not making them burn out on the education, all of that's a balance. And I'm a firm believer in tying any sort of incentive to a behavior that you want a user to have, whether it's a monetary incentive, whether it's an extra day or two of PTO, or whatever the organizational feels is acceptable. Humans are creatures of nature that just follow incentives, in my opinion. So if you incentivize the security awareness training program in the proper way to get users to actually follow it, then that's going to lead to the greatest risk reduction. And really just communicating with users regularly on the phishing campaigns that an organization is seeing and what they should be looking for, just on a least a quarterly basis, if not more frequently, just so that it's kept in the forefront of those users' minds that the organization is constantly under attack, and there are things that they need to be doing, just as it relates to being aware of what a phishing attack looks like and how to prevent it, that they should be reporting it, and all of those things to really reduce the overall impact.
Thank you again so much, Derek, for your time and expertise. So for everyone listening, thank you so much. Tune in next time for our next episode. As always, if you have a particular topic that you would like to hear in this podcast, please contact me at bdean@lbmc.com. To learn more about LBMC Security and the services that we provide, please visit lbmcsecurity.com and have a great day. Thank you.